Hello, I'm Tanya Sharp. Welcome to this presentation of our series on Individual Education Program, IEP, Consideration of Special Factors, ensuring all pieces of the puzzle connect. In this presentation, we will discuss the communication needs special factor for the Admissions and Release Committee, or ARC, is required to consider, which is, does the child have communication needs? For students with communication needs, the ARC addresses the student's language and communication needs in the area of disfluencies, like stuttering, blocks, prolongations, or repetitions, impaired articulation, language impairment, voice impairment, delayed acquisition of language, or an absence of language. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, Part B, Federal Registrar from 2006 emphasizes that Section 300.324, subsection A, 2, 4, consistent with Section 614, subsection D, 3, B, 4 of the Act, requires the IEP team to consider opportunities for direct communications with peers and professional personnel in the child's language and communication mode, academic level, and full range of needs, including opportunities for direct instruction in the child's language and communication mode. From this regulation, when we develop an IEP, the ARC must answer the consideration of special factors for IEP development related to communication. The ARC must answer, does the child have communication needs? If the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, or present levels, indicate communication needs or adverse impact, then this should be marked yes. If yes, the ARC must specify by marking see present levels for communication status, which would need to include the specific communication needs as well as present levels of functioning in regard to receptive and expressive communication skills. The ARC may specify more details in the Other Specify space on the IEP. If the ARC marks yes to communication needs, then the ARC must address the need for a particular device or service section of the special factors as well. For more information, see video 8 on the need for a particular device or service. These guiding questions are to assist the ARC when making special considerations to determine the student's communication needs. If the ARC marked yes in the special factors, then the ARC can use these guiding questions and the additional in the Guidance for IEP Development document to consider the student's needs, strategies, supports, goals, modifications, and etc. to address the specific behavior and how those strategies and supports would be used based on the individual student's needs. The following questions may help guide the ARC when making special considerations to determine the student's communication needs. For instance, what communicative demands and challenges does the student have? Does the student have the skills and strategies necessary to meet communicative demands and challenges? Does the student have speech sound production errors? Does the student have language deficits? Does the student have pragmatic deficits? Does the student require assistive devices to aid in the development and use of meaningful language to provide a mode of communication or both? If the ARC has determined communication is a need and has documented the strategies and supports needed, the ARC would then need to ensure the needs, strategies, and supports are connected throughout the IEP. Now, let's discuss some of the ways ARCs should ensure the IEP is comprehensive, consistent, and compliant. As mentioned in the previous slides, communication addresses the areas of disfluencies, impaired articulation, language impairment, voice impairment, delayed acquisition of language, or an absence of language, and the student's communication needs in order to receive instruction and communicate academically and socially. Communication needs should be integrated and documented throughout the IEP as a part of planning for the student. In order to make those connections throughout the IEP, the ARC will need to ensure that if communication is a factor, that the needs or concerns described in present levels align with and support the information included in the special factors section, which would include the student's current level of ability to communicate and preferred method to communication in specific environments. Does the student currently use an augmentative or alternative communication device, or AAC, at home but not at school? Do they prefer multiple methods to communicate? Special education and related services should address the student needs related to their level of proficiency at communicating and instruction at using different methods to communicate. If communication is a factor, school personnel need to be trained on how the student communicates, who to ask for help for modifications that may be needed to the communication system, such as adding words and pictures to a communication board or device. These are just some of the ways ARCs should ensure the IEP is comprehensive, consistent, and compliant. Now let's look at an example of how those pieces connect. Here's an example of some of the connections, even though there are many more of the areas that ARC will need to consider and connect to be consistent. If the ARC documents in the present levels that the student has communication needs, then the communication section of the special factors should be marked yes, and the student current communication needs, strengths, and data should be documented in the present levels for communication status. Now, let's look at a few pieces of the IEP that the ARC would make connections to. Again, this is not a complete list of all the connections that will need to be made, but only a few examples. The present level should include current data regarding the student's current level of proficiency in communication and the student's preferred mode or modes of communication. If the student has any behaviors associated with their communication barriers, those should be addressed too, such as a nonverbal student getting frustrated when not able to communicate what they need. If the behavior impedes their learning or that of others, then it may need to be addressed in the special factors of behavior and within other areas of the IEP. If the communication special factors indicates the student uses pictures or an augmentative or alternative communication device, then that should be documented throughout the IEP as needed, such as in the AT special factors, which would lead to the possibility of it being included as an accommodation, the use of technology. If the student requires the use of an AAC device or other communication system, regardless of low tech or high tech, school personnel who work with or interact with the student may need to be trained on to use and modify the AAC device. These are just a few examples of how those connections will be made to ensure the IEP is compliant, comprehensive, and consistent throughout. The present levels are the baseline to the student's strengths and needs. They are the beginning foundations for the ARC to build the IEP. As the ARC builds that IEP, the information and data provided in the present levels are going to connect and help the ARC to develop an appropriate IEP that includes all the pieces that connect in order for there to be progress documented and seen through the data. This puzzle piece graphic on the screen is an outline of a child's head with puzzle pieces in it. It does not depict every detailed piece of the IEP, but it is meant for you to visualize how all the pieces of the IEP will make up an individualized and appropriate program for students. The IEP should be compliant, comprehensive, and consistent throughout, which includes the special factors. Remember, if the ARC marks any of the special factors yes, such as communication, it should be addressed throughout the entire IEP. If communication is marked no in special factors, then before the ARC marks reader, scribe, or technology in accommodation, or documents behaviors associated with communication barriers in the present levels, think about how that is inconsistent if being monitored. The need for those items indicate the student has communication needs to be addressed to ensure the student is able to access the general curriculum. In order to ensure our puzzle pieces all fit together, we need to think through all the services and items the student will need to have access to in order to be successful within their school-wide environment. Using all pieces of data and information, a complete, compliant, and comprehensive IEP appropriate for the student can be developed by the ARC annually. Here are a few additional resources that may assist in learning more about the process and requirements related to the consideration of special factors, specifically communication needs in IEP development. Thank you for watching the IEP Consideration of Special Factors Communication Needs. The other parts in the series clarify how each section of the special factors in the IEP connect together to create a comprehensive, consistent, compliant, and effective program ensuring student growth. Specifically, we will look at regulatory requirements for each factor, along with guiding questions for the ARC in considering each factor, and how to ensure if the ARC marks any